Let's talk.
Giles Brown.
Buying silence, how oligarchs, corporations and plutocrats use the law to gag their clients. In the era of win at all costs, whether legal or illegal is upon us, this is the era of the slap case. I am joined by David Hooper, author of the book Buying Silence. David, good morning to you.
Good morning from London.
Good to have you with us. Explain to us a little bit about your background and how you're eminently qualified to write Buying Silence.
Well, I was a media lawyer for the best part of 50 years, and I was really on the receiving end for acting for clients, for publishers, when they were sued by people like Mohammed Fayed, Robert Maxwell, and they tried to suppress by the depth of their pockets what was written about them, and they used pretty shocking tactics to do so.
Because so you are in a way standing up for perhaps the little man against these people with large amounts of money who are above the law. Now, I mentioned something called a slap. Now, that isn't me applying my hand with maximum force to the side of your cheek, David, but what actually is a slap then?
Well, it's an American acronym which was invented in 1996. It's basically about trying to silence opponents. It stands for Strategic Lawsuits Against Public Participation. American like those sort of terms that sort of make up words. It started actually not with libel, but for property companies trying to suppress environmental groups or people who are objecting to planning. But it became a very useful weapon in the very powerful that you just, if you had an article that you didn't like, you just issued a writ for libel, and that was cripplingly expensive for the defendant. So what happened was things didn't get published, or else the media had to self-censor. Because with Fayed, where we've had the scandal of all the rapes and sexual abuse and police corruption, people knew about it. We had exposed it in 1997, but during Fayed's lifetime, nobody really dared publish it, or when they did publish, they did it in very moderate terms, holding back on a whole lot of things.
I mean, presumably this is used then, quite a lot by the rich and powerful to silence those who are trying to shine a light on what they do. And it's not only little man. I mean, the case of Vanity Fair, for example, against Fayed, of course, which you were involved in. Tell me a little bit more about that, please.
Well, this was it was meant to be a profile of Fayed because they were largely American publication. They were intrigued by the fact that Fayed hadn't got citizenship, and that he seemed to be a thorn in the flesh of the establishment, all things that rather intrigued them. But when they looked into it, they found this shocking abuse of women, racism, corruption of the police. And not only would he assault these women, but if they kicked up a fuss, they got arrested and sort of held in a police station. They were always released without charge, but sometimes at 3 o'clock in the morning after having been locked up for 7 hours. I mean, it was a shocking abuse of power, and it just gets worse and worse the more one looks into it.
So what was why did you decide to write the book Buying Justice?
Well, it was partly the Fayed abuse, and partly the fact that we weren't really tackling this problem. I mean, it's been tackled in America, it's been tackled in Australia and Canada, and in the European Union and Council of Europe, they've taken much greater steps. And I wanted really to help move towards a slaps law. We do have a sort of slaps law in something called the Economic Crimes and Corporate Transparency Act, but it's incredibly complicated and pretty ineffective. And our government have been rather dragging their feet. They say they will do it, but they are dragging their feet. And there are a lot of pressure groups, and I'm trying to do my own little contribution to that, to get a proper comprehensive law. We were going to have a proper law in 2024, but unfortunately it got held up by the election. Somebody brought in a private member's bill, but that lapsed when we had the election in July 2024. And the government have yet to introduce a proper SLAPS bill.
I mean, presumably this is particularly sort of an English law problem, because rather than something you would see on the, on the European mainland in the EU, because of the way that the legal system is structured in the UK.
Well, it certainly happens in other countries because the powerful have the same motivation, but England is the worst, and also you quite often find English solicitors orchestrating SLAP actions in countries, and I say mainland Europe. I was thinking of Malta, but part of the European Union, where when the investigative journalist Daphne Caruana Galizia was blown up and murdered by her opponents, that the English lawyers were largely orchestrating the cases. There were 42 libel writs against her when it died, but you certainly do get it in other countries. I mean, Poland is another bad example, but. The one difference is that people prefer English law because it's thought to have kudos to get an English judgment. And of course, the law is very favourable to claimants because defendants have to prove the truth. And that's very difficult when you're up against these gangsters.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. I mean, it's being used by oligarchs, organised crime. The majority of these cases should see the light of day because they are in the public interest. And obviously, if you're trying to suppress something because you don't like what they've written, it's not because you don't. It's shining a light on your nefarious dealings. Then this surely has implications on the British legal system and also the English legal system, and also, of course, we're talking oligarchs again, and influences on. And it's not just having an effect within the boundaries of the UK, of the English judicial system. I mean, this can be applied sort of almost worldwide, no?
Yes, and remember, it's not just for Russian oligarchs because, of course, there are not so many oligarchs around in this country now. I mean, people who were running frauds. There was a woman called Ruja Ignatova who ran this fraudulent OneCoin cryptocurrency, and a lot of people lost money because she had very aggressive lawyers trying to silence things.
And you, of course, have been yourself a victim or on the receiving end of a slap.
Yes, so when I was doing a case, I mean, it was effectively a slap action to. It all related to Greece, but they sued in England, which of course was very expensive for this small Greek newspaper. And eventually they got a settlement on economic grounds that effectively silenced the Greek newspaper, but then it transferred to Greece. And when I gave evidence in the Greek Supreme Court, just in front of a judge, lo and behold, I suddenly got a 70-page writ from Greece accusing me of perjury, criminal libel. Apparently, I face 3 years jail. It's complete nonsense. It was evidence I gave in court, and the judge accepted it, and she ruled in our favour. But again, you go after the lawyers. I mean, there are no tactics these guys won't use. I'm not thinking particularly of this man, but it's sort of part and parcel of bugging people, hacking them, using public relations consultants to denigrate them, private investigators to intimidate them. And the whole system, I mean, there are a number of lawyers, they're far too expensive, and there's a win-at-all-costs tactics. Some of them will do anything to win the case. And it's part of a bigger problem with English libel law. It's far too expensive. And cases that might cost you 10, 20,000 euros in mainland Europe, cost you hundreds of thousands of pounds, if not millions. So there's one case going through the courts now where the estimates are 10 million pounds costs, 5 million on each side. And that is ridiculous. You need to get things in front of judges for a quick solution. I mean, of course, people should be entitled to defend their reputation, but the two bad things about Zooms, about
slaps. Yeah.
Slaps.
The Zooms too, David. I mean, let's
at my Zoom.
I know. It happens.
Too many four-letter words,
Indeed.
but luckily, very appropriate ones. But I mean, there are two problems with that. One is in our libel law. One is that it gives far too much power to the wealthy, and the other problem is that people who are not wealthy just cannot afford to bring libel cases. And I mean, people who don't have lots of money do have reputations, and sometimes when one thinks of people who've been under wrongful suspicion of murder, they've been treated very, very badly by the press. But unless they can get a friendly lawyer to do it on a contingency basis, they just can't bring libel actions, and that I think is wrong. So I'm saying not only should there be a proper slaps law, but you just need to recalibrate the law of libel. And do these people always need to bring multiple actions? I don't think they do. I think you have to look at, on the one side, at freedom of speech and your right to information against their right to protect their reputations. And you need to leave it in the hands of a judge and get a quick solution. Because I think what people want is justice that is quick and cheap.
Yeah, but you see, you're saying that you mentioned this quite quick. The having a fast resolution, and obviously, if it is in the interests of those who are doing this to make it an attritional campaign, to drag it out so that people get dispirited and basically want to throw in the towel after sort of months or even years, presumably, David.
Yeah, I mean, there was a recent case where this man who's made a fortune in telecom deals around the world sued in respect of what was really a due diligence report on his suitability for a job, and it must have cost him about 4 million. It went on for 3 years, and that was just on procedural applications. If it had gone on to trial, it would have probably cost about 7 million, and it would have probably taken 4 or 5 years. It's crazy. It's ridiculous, and it's unjust.
So are you hopeful, David? Is that why? I mean, because obviously it'd be very good. It would be very easy to sort of go, well, this is just another example of the wealthy or the super rich once again treading on people with impunity. Are you hopeful that there will be a change? And have you seen the green shoots, perhaps, of a judicial recovery, David?
I'm hopeful that there will be an improvement to the slaps law, but I still think we need to have a good look at libel law, because there are these small boutique firms who act for people like Prigozhin, and on absolutely, he was the founder of the Wagner Group.
Yes.
And he was an ex-convict and murdered people. I mean, he was a dreadful person, but lawyers perfectly happy. They said they didn't know. Well, if they'd done 5 minutes research, and they ought to be required to do 5 minutes research, I think things will get better, but we need to have a pretty radical look at things. And we need also to tighten up on what is acceptable behavior by lawyers.
And that would be a tightening up that might take some time, David. The book is called Buying Silence: How Oligarchs, Corporations and Plutocrats Use the Law to Gag Their Critics. It is by David Hooper, who we're speaking to today. David, if people want to find you online and say nice things about you and hopefully not serve you with another slap, where can they find you?
Well, if they can remember the word Super Hooper, that's the name of my website.
Which is, I think, the Marvel movie that we need, I think. I can see you now in a cape, David.
Well, it was a nickname I picked up at university, and it sort of stuck with me for the next 50 years.
By the way, listeners, you can order the book via our own virtual bookstore on tre.radio. That's nickname has got me completely. The book is called Buying Silence. It's by David Hooper. David, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you this morning.
Well, thank you very much indeed.